Brand new weapons await us in patch 8.3 and they are crazy good. While the fight against RNG starts with you being able to add your own sockets to gear. A fourth essence is making its way, promising us even more mindless grinding, while Bolvar finally accepts Vulpiras into his life. All this plus more in On Cooldown, your weekly WoW news show.
8.3 is almost upon us, and if you thought that fighting Nezhat in an ancient Lovecraftian city of a raid was crazy, then wait till you see the items that drop there. Well, right now only one stands out the most, but all of them are actually really cool, and I cannot stress this enough. It's really important for items to have more than just secondary stats. Why? Well, because, but more importantly, they're just cooler that way. The one weapon that's been making some noise at the moment is Shu Vaz, obviously. This is a two-handed axe that gives you a 5% bonus to armor, so a tank weapon, and it being an axe is clearly aimed at Blood Death Knights. The other cool effect is that once you have lost cumulatively 100% of your HP, you will deal damage to all enemies in 20 yards, equal to 1000% of your armor. Losing HP as a blood decay is not a big deal, and that proc can essentially happen quite a few times per minute depending on how hard the boss will hit. And if the damage seems high, well, I don't know. I'm just like you, but let's take a look at someone else who actually got to test it on the PTR. So let's roll that damn clip. Okay. Oh. Well now, would you look at that? The frames are dropping a bit, but that's fine because the tank has more than double the DPS of the top DPSer in the raids. I mean, yeah, PTR. This is clearly overtuned and will not make it to live in this current iteration, but the effect is really cool, and if it will be bumped down, I hope it's not bumped down too much, because there are more weapons like this that take advantage of some proper design creativity to give you interesting effects. Although this might be nerfed, I really hope they don't make it unusable and that they continue to make gear like this going forward into 8.3 and Shadowlands. They recently released a new list of weapons that will drop, and each one has a very cool effect. Some that actually scale with your HP, possibly incentivizing going for eye level when gearing to stack that HP higher and higher, and other weapons having the loyalty to the end mechanic where you benefit if more allies carry the same item. There are still more to come, I would hope, since we haven't seen shields yet, and essentially all of these weapons had placeholder stats like versatility and haste prior to their effects being put into the game. And the reason I'm saying we will have more is because currently there's only one shield on the loot table and 5 specs in the game that use shields. The shield and even more weapons have standard stats, which seems to be what Blizz will be deviating from slowly but surely. One thing that will stay the same is Concordance. Wait, wrong expansion. Purity of the World Soul. It's a similar to the Concordance mechanic from Legion. Remember that 4th essence slot shaped as a diamond that we've seen in the announcement video? Well, it turns out it's not an essence slot after all, but it's a slot where you put or get a point for every neck level starting with 85. Each point increases your corruption resistance by 1, and it seems to scale indefinitely, or until you feel like drinking battery acid from all those island expeditions. Island expeditions. On one hand, it's a progression system that will enable you to use more and more corrupted items, which will probably turn us into old gods by the end. On the other hand, islands.
Enough with those goddamn islands, man. Time to get back to the cold, dark, chilling world of the Dead Knights. Or should I say, the brand new fluffy cute can I have him for a pet, Pandaren and Vulpira Dead Knights. Hey! Now seriously, I cannot wait for me and Bolvar to have a sit down and have him explain how the fuck a bipedal fox who sings songs about alpacas can turn to him and ask to be killed and then be accepted as a worthy hero class of a Dead Knight. That time may never come, I'm afraid, but we do have the new Bolvar and Darion dialogues that await us in patch 8.3 if we ever decide to level a Death Knight. Why do we get this before Shadowlands, you ask? And why after we saw the ass-whooping Sylvanas delivered to Bolvar, you ask again? Well, apparently Bolvar has sensed that Death's power is getting stronger, so he started to bolster his army early. Thus, prior to the events in the Shadowlands cinematic, he started recruiting Death Knights from all races, and as you probably saw in the cinematic, it helped him a lot. Told your ass not to get Vulpera's Death Knights into your army, Bolvar. Jesus, man, sometimes I feel I don't know you anymore. Anyhow, Bolvar's dialogue has references to the old Arthas dialogue, and I do appreciate when proper homage is being paid, while Darion's addresses the same threat, pointing out that the Knights of the Ebon Blade have sensed this threat from the shadows too. It's all juicy and lovely to hear, but one thing I really want to see now, I mean after the Shadowlands cinematic, is Bolvar's new in-game model, with his badass hammer, and his sad Alabama look in his eye after losing that duel with Sylvanas. Told you, Bolvi. Told you, man. The goddamn Vulperas.
And in today's comment of the day, we have Leka Forla, and he said,
Best show ever.
What goes on behind the scenes when making this show? Well, we got our hands on some exclusive backstage footage.
Who is leading the Forsaken? We know Sylvanas is on the secret journey to ICC to remove Bolvar from his throne and tear the rift to the Shadowlands, and it will take her until 8.3 is done to do that. In the meantime, the Forsaken are without a leader. A questline on the PTR, an incomplete one, shows that Kalia Menethil could take up the mantle, yet she is a light resurrected being, not even sure if undead, and at this point, does the Horde need even more alliance meddling? Lillian Voss has also been mentioned, and she is probably my favorite Forsaken after Nathanos. But Voss barely seems the leading type, or at least the type that would be willing to do the job. Who else then? I place my vote for a specific Dark Ranger that has been present in the game for quite a while. She rarely shows up as a major character, but is always there in the background and sometimes not even that far in the back. And I'm talking, of course, about Dark Ranger Velonara. And she has been the left hand of Sylvanas, well, left hand if Nathanos was the right hand. She remained frighteningly loyal to Sylvanas throughout her war campaign and years prior, all the way back to Cataclysm. She also appears in the Blood Elf Heritage Armor questline as a Ranger General Ghost fighting at the Scourge. Maybe not a general though. In 8.3, she has an interesting dialogue that has been data mined alongside other juicy bits of lore pertaining to Sylvanas loyalists and Nezhat loyalists. For one thing, Velonara and her rangers never faltered in their service to Sylvanas. We Dark Rangers were fiercely loyal to Sylvanas. We trusted her, followed her commands. It is clear that our loyalty was never truly reciprocated. She goes on to say that the Sindorai and the Forsaken are her kin and she will stay with the Horde. She has a strong kinship with the undead, and one of the most interesting tidbits was a line she says, "I refuse to be a slave to this torment." This sounds familiar, right? I should hope so, because it's similar to what Sylvanas says in a more nihilistic way. What are we if not slaves to this torment? Did Blizz add this line as an Easter egg or fan service? Or are they hinting at the fact that Velonara has stripped herself of Sylvanas and the bad things she represented, being able to be, in a silly way I know, a better Forsaken? As a ranger and one being close to Sylvanas for so many years, she is accustomed to what it means to lead the Forsaken more than figures like Voss or Kalia, and I think she could make for an interesting character with a lot of lore to back her up. But we won't just talk about Sylvanas loyalties now. How about those weird people like Taliesin who kept their Eye of N'Zoth crown transmog thingy? Well, there has been some dialogue mined on the PTR that followers of N'Zoth will share with you if you have this specific article of clothing. One specific line stands out. They say he is dead, slain in Ny'alotha. It can be. We still carry his gift. Awesome impression, right? Right, thought so too. This brings us back to subtle mentions from the devs and actual responses to questions about all gods being dead. We've defeated one version of them, and who knows if another manifestation will eventually take place, says the newser. Or what Alex Afrasiabi said at BlizzCon 2018, death isn't the end of the line in World of Warcraft. although he could have been saying that to support or hint at Shadowlands being the next expansion at the time. It's clear that they are leaving doors open to revisit these lore characters called Old Gods, but are the loyalties dialogue again fan service, or will they be canon, and will we have one final battle with the Old Gods before we fight Void? Lords, Masters, you know what I mean. Oh.
No, I do. I totally do know what you mean. And hey, I totally get that the old gods will come back and bite us all in the butt and cause the end of the cosmos.
Well, if it isn't the potential of another grind again. So, patch 8.3 will have our boy Wrathion be a pal and help us a bit with our RNG issues, meaning that he will vendor you some interesting items. I mean, of course you want a new mount and a bunch of Essence of Horrific Visions to get into Horrific Visions. That's the most important thing, right? No, the most intriguing item here is Gouged Eye of Nezhat, which will allow you to add sockets to your gear. I mean, hell, this would have been a wonderful addition to the blacksmithing profession, to be honest, because, I don't know, man, it just makes a lot of sense. But nope, Wrathion has a huge load of Nezhat's eyes and he wants to do business with you. The main thing about this is that currently, the cost of one such item is a whopping 25k corrupted mementos. Now, if you remember, I talked about these currencies in a previous On Cooldown episode. These drop after you finish a horrific vision, and at the time, you got a maximum of 500 corrupted mementos when you were done. Now, if my calculations are correct, in order to get one Gouged Eye of Nezhat, you need to do 50. Fucking 50! This is insane, especially when you take into account that the same mementos are used to unlock traits from the Titanic Research Archive that will allow you to stay longer and longer within the horrific visions. I can see why players are up and on with this, and you should be too, because it doesn't take a brain surgeon to realize this will be a huge grind fest once again. However, do keep in mind this is still the PTR and this patch is set to release at the beginning of next year, so all these numbers floating around might change. Also, if you take a step back and look a bit at the bigger picture, this is a good step in the right direction when addressing RNG. I mean, currently in patch 8.2.5, if a ring drops for you and does not proc a socket, you'll probably not use it, but if it does proc with a socket and doesn't have good stats for you, you will use it, and that's the main thing you should get out of this. In 8.3, when you get a BIS item for your spec, you will have the option to also socket it. No more RNG socket procs. Again, I strongly believe this would have been a great addition to blacksmithing that would have also boosted jewel crafted in the mix, and the numbers required to get one of these eyes are indeed scary to look at. But this sentiment of an endless grind is, let's face it, started from Legion and intensified in BFA, and it's really getting a bit heavy to expect. So you'd be correct to at least wish that these numbers are not final, given the fact that it's still PTR. Since they did show a lot of willingness to hear and implement feedback, I think it's time for you to get into that PTR and start submitting bugs, or at least on the official feedback threads for 8.3 to let them know of our concerns regarding the potential hamster wheel gameplay they're trying to shove in once again.
Oh man, those corrupted weapons look
Hell yeah.
sick, man.
Hell yeah.
Wow, and if you, I don't know if a lot of people realize, but they introduced them in the Dungeon Journal with general like haste verse crit stats, and then they just replaced them with like actual effects.
Yeah, man, it's actually a good thing. It's a good thing. I prefer to have OP shit, which, let's face it, it will be fixed up until the release is being
numbers
made.
down, probably.
But man, do I miss a huge, I don't know, just having the wish to get an item that's so broken and everybody knows it's broken that when you walk up with it somewhere, everyone's like, ah, man, you're playing with that stupid sword shit, man. That's OP as fuck, man. I would love that shit to be back again. Sadly, they'll probably fix it. But again,
but
cool
even
effects.
like all weapons seem to go into the direction where they will just have effects.
Yes.
And that is amazing.
It's really good, man. It's really good. And on top of that, I cannot not stress this enough, man. That weapon may have the option position to be socketed. We talked about this with the gouged eye of Nezhat. Now, again, this is a really good idea, and I know, like in at BlizzCon, Ian did say that, you know, sockets are way too unbalanced and they don't really want to go there. And then 8.3 comes along with, hey, you can add sockets to your gear. It's pretty, but I think it was referring to Shadowlands. Anyways, how about Bolvar, man? How about that? I'm getting the Vulpira's Dead Knights. We're getting the Vulpira's Dead Knights.
Well, I always thought that Bolvar would raise his army after he lost to Sylvanas because he realized.
No.
It's happening before.
Yeah, man, he got them Vulpiras, and you see what happened, man.
Well, if he had Vulpiras in the fight against Sylvanas, I think it would have gone a different way.
No, that's what I'm saying. There were Vulpiras there. They're no good. They cannot be good Dead Knights. That's why he lost. I mean, she just like arrowed all those armies because there were a bunch of Vulpiras.
Well, Vulpiras aside, I actually like how Kultirin and Zandalari look in the
Zandalari, I think at this point it's safe to say Zandalari trolls can look good in anything. It's like, goddamn, man, that model is so great. I observed a quite difference within Bolvar's voice in the Shadowlands gameplay features trailer, because he's the one who's talking there, and the voice on the PTR. Like on the Shadowlands trailer, if you listen, it's like really a little bit more higher tuned, and on the gameplay, on the PTR, it's much more artist, like much more low and, you know, sad.
Oh, well, that's
dramatic.
I don't know if that's very relevant, because usually when we data mine, when people data mine the voiceovers, that they don't always have all the effects in place. If you listen to the Darien voiceover,
that one has all the effects. I can be
also
sure of it.
But I don't think Darien has all the voiceovers. It feels like a very normal voice for Darien. Maybe a little bit of. It has a lot of effects.
There's a lot of a lot of like reverse effects as well. But we ain't getting into that technical shit right now. Okay. So overall, the dialogue is really awesome, and we have more awesome dialogues with our Patreons because we do talk with them. And hey, man, you can become a Patreon too and join this awesome team of fellows, you know, girls and gals that support all of Marcelian&Online content, guides, WoW news shows, WoW talks, all the juicy stuff. Everything is down in the description.
Down below. And
also the Teespring link with a bunch of Marcelian&Online stuff with t-shirts, mugs, and hoodies. And, you know, winter's coming, man. Winter's coming. You better get goddamn hoodie, you know.
Yep. Thank you so much for watching the video. Have a nice weekend and see you next time.
And remember, tomorrow's stream day.